experience of shame becomes present in our treatment room, how empathic confrontation strategies can become so necessary in our quest to quiet the critic, to convert the critic, to exile the critic in the spirit of lessening the shame that shows up as a type of character assassination. Let me say a little bit more about that as I open my screen. And we'll start here. The inner critic can be, as I see it, the shame's chauffeur or primary escort, carrying forth this sense of self that can feel quite annihilated, just debased in a very primal way, if you will. We use empathic confrontation strategies in a number of ways, but also here to reconcile that inner noise. And when we can help our patients to begin to, shame might be the detective or the detector. So once they start to feel that all too familiar sensation that accompanies this thing called shame, this embarrassment, humiliation, this distressful sense of duck and cover, wanting to just keep oneself from being visible or exposed. Not only the internal driver, the internal sense of worthlessness that can accompany this experience of shame, but the perceptions, the external perceptions of others, the actions and rejection of others, the judgment, the opinions, the sense of deference that sometimes comes when one is in a shameful state. Empathic confrontation, which again is the sense making of how this all came to be, and then confronting this experience in a way to create an accuracy. And remembering that when we get accuracy, it's not about just making a negative a positive. We don't just go from negative to positive. Accuracy means that there are times when we need to help our patients to be accountable and responsible for contributions they may be making out there in the world in a way that is unhelpful to them, hurtful to others, largely, in fact, responsible for pushing people away. I know this from working with narcissists, right? That a big part of the shame that they may feel when they experience themselves as the bad guy, some of it is not that they are the bad person, but that the behaviors are not good. They're hurtful. They may be bad decisions or bad actions coming from a person who was once upon a time an innocent, who learned ways of coping in the world that have harmful effects on others. So there is accountability that's necessary. And this has a lot to do with what I want to talk about in terms of this inevitability of shame. But there's a volume control on shame and on the inner critic. And the problem is that that volume control can sometimes be turned up very loudly because of its original source. So back to my screen for a second. And we can think about shame as this kind of Beauty and the Beast, on the one hand, that there's protective elements that come with the natural consequences of experiencing shame in order to differentiate between right and wrong decisions, safe and unsafe, unhelpful choices that a child might make, that teachable lessons for preparation for living in the adult world. And then there's the beast, which when the inner critic is harsh and strong and punitive and threatening, that can leave one with not only very black and white thinking about the world, but a lot of unreconciled anger and feelings of injustice and unfairness and feelings of just terribly low self-worth that needs a place to hide and a a mechanism for survival, which we know can land in these maladaptive coping modes, like just going into complete disconnection, head down, workaholism, addictions of other sorts, or in overcompensating modes which can lead to a lot of bully and attack, defensiveness, criticalness, contemptuous types of behaviors. The inevitability of shame is, as Sylvan Tompkins would tell us, helps us define the boundaries of our positive pursuits. So again, Beauty and the Beast, right? Otherwise, what are the limits of excitement, of joy? These positive affects are so rewarding that one could ask why we don't pursue them always and all the time. This is where shame comes in. As organisms, we need to learn when to stop and why. And so, an example, a simple message of no, accompanied by a loving tone, an embrace, a gentle redirect, can spare the child from embedding toxic elements of shame. Remember, Sylvan Tompkins, famous for the notion of toxic shame, while protecting them from a danger, teaching a lesson of inclusion and regard for the rights of others, setting limits for frustration tolerance, patience and reciprocity, sustaining a secure attachment. Well, isn't this the thing that seems to be just so sorely missing in the lives of so many of our patients, and particularly those who have problems with impulse and control, insufficient limits, entitlement. It may be in their biological predisposition. It may be more part of this sort of combination of nature nurture, as we see in personality disorder so often. But what we come to recognize is someone who has not developed a capacity for frustration tolerance, for being uncomfortable. And when made to do so, can even utter words like, they think they're making a fool out of me. Being forced to wait in line, which is what we all have to queue up sometimes. That's just the way the world works. Nobody enjoys it, but it is just a part of how we organize and maintain some orderliness and civility, and we exercise our patience, and we find ways to listen to music, read something, chat with someone in the line standing next to us, or just huff and puff a little bit until we get to the front of the line. But for those who have not developed this capacity, this can be an activating condition for the inner critic. Look at you, you're making a fool out of you. All of these incompetent people who just make a fool out of you. So you've got this over controller who blames the world for this, terrible situation. And look, there may be some truth to the fact that it's not a very well organized system, but it gets exaggerated, of course, in the overcompensation mode. And then you've got this inner critic saying, go ahead, stand here, look like an idiot. Don't do anything about this. Don't make a fuss. You're the one, who looks just like, part of the herd of cows like the rest of them. And can be just so violating to one's sense of spirit. Think about a parent who continues to bark the words, "What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?" Or the parent who just completely avoids and neglects the child from being able to develop that sense of tolerance for things that might be uncomfortable, right? So they get this kind of no limits, no boundaries, no end to the joy and the excitement until there's, a feeling of upset in the stomach, or somebody else has to supply a consequence, or they just become exhausted from the experience that they are engaged in, or until it becomes dangerous. And then someone steps in and becomes highly critical. If we take a moment and we just recognize the power of no, right? The power of no. And as in that example, there's a difference between if you listen. I love this exercise that I learned once upon a time from a class with Dan Siegel, where if you listen to the word no, it has a lot of power in terms of how it's emphasized or how it's spoken. So a simple no, like, "No, sweetheart, that's not going to work. That's going to, that's gonna be a problem," or, "No, honey, that's really too much. We need to stop now." That no is very different than no that's no. How many times have I said, "No, stop it?" A no that comes with a great force, a no that comes with a stern look, a towering presence, a threatening posture, a no that comes with a "you'll be sorry," a no that comes with a judgment about the lovability, the viability, the intelligence in some cases, the worth and value of the little child. And again, yes, parenting is a hard job, but these are extreme versions of how one can apply discipline, which is not a dirty word, which is a necessary part of being a good parent, is boundaries and limits and discerning between safe and unsafe practices while allowing our children to explore and to take risks that are guided and supervised and appropriate for their age, for their level of competence, for their level of understanding, right? We're preparing them to live in the world.